5 years ago, Maine was in the middle of the COVID pandemic. Many businesses and all schools were closed. There had been stay-at-home orders, and thousands of people were wondering if the virus would become as severe here as in some other parts of the country.
Leading that battle in Maine was a newcomer, Dr. Nirav Shah, director of the Maine CDC, who would go on to become deputy director of the national CDC in 2023. 207's Don Kerrigan covered the pandemic and Dr. Shah extensively at the time and talked with him a few days ago for a look back. Hey, Don.
I did. Hi, guys. Dr. Shah, of course, now has left the U.S. CDC and is back at his home in Maine, preparing for the next phase of career, which is creating and teaching a public health curriculum at Colby College. And judging from our talk, he has a lot to teach. Are you looking forward, after all the tumult of the last 5 years,
Yes,
to being part of a place like this?
You said it right.
After 6 years at the center of the storm, Nirav Shah is ready for a while for the relative calm of the Colby College campus.
It's going to be really nice to be in a place of optimism rather than pessimism.
As we find new cases in other counties.
Mainers didn't know Dr. Shah until the first days of the COVID pandemic. As head of the Maine CDC, he would soon become an almost daily presence in their lives. We talked at Colby, where he will soon begin teaching public health, about battling the COVID pandemic and the lessons learned.
Are we better positioned to deal with that now than we were 5 years ago?
I'm afraid in some respects the answer is no. In some respects the answer is yes. With respect to our ability to detect situations that are occurring, we have a much finer tuned set of antennae that are more sensitive to disruptions or an abnormal number of people going to the hospital. In other respects, we are not as well prepared as we were 5 years ago. There is still significant divisions among people. We're in a world where, at least in the United States, a large fraction of people think we did way too much and overreacted. And an equal number of people think we underreacted and didn't take it seriously enough. And so how do you reconcile those two things as a preparedness matter?
Dr. Shah has no doubts that overall, Mainers responded well to COVID.
You name the metric. If you're supposed to be at the top of the list, Maine was at the top of the list. And if you're supposed to be at the bottom of the list, Maine was at the bottom of the list, even before vaccines. Whether it was mortality rates, even adjusting for our age, we were one of the lowest. When you get to vaccines, start at the, if you look at the list of states in terms of the most vaccinated after the first round of boosters, there's one state that was at the top of the list, far and above the others.
That's us?
That's us.
But it required tough decisions for many people, including Shah and state leaders, closing businesses, closing schools, and some say Maine went too far. Dr. Shah disagrees.
We all have to remember that based on what we knew at the time, the imperative was to make the smartest decisions and, as Governor Mills directed, to save the most number of lives. Retrospective analysis is always easier than analysis in the moment.
He also says that in those first few months, he decided to publicly remember those who died.
It was really important for me to bear in mind that this pandemic was not a faceless or nameless one. I think in a crisis, folks become numb or blinded by the large numbers. And so for me, as just a personal matter, I felt like it was important to bear that in mind.
And it all became more complicated, he says, as the science of the COVID virus changed.
I remember the call that I was on with scientists at the US CDC, where they were walking through data that they had just analyzed from a cruise ship, the Diamond Princess, where their epidemiological analysis showed that the only way that outbreak could have happened was if people were spreading it before they had symptoms. That was a game changer. Not something we see with flu viruses, but that fact changed a lot of our analysis.
And that learning curve, he agrees, also gave ammunition to some of the critics.
One of the things that I personally wish that I had done more of is communicating about the way in which science changes. I think a criticism that many on the right have is, hey, you guys change your minds all the time. And I get that. I get where it comes from. And what I didn't do, I think, enough of during COVID was to say, this is what scientists know today. It is absolutely going to be different tomorrow. And here's the key part. That's a good thing.
The arrival of vaccines was welcomed by most Mainers, but also fueled criticism for a range of reasons. And the whole experience, he says, was a challenge and a lesson for public health leaders.
Still a lot of distrust of all of you.
Yes, absolutely. And that's not going to go away anytime soon. And again, I think it's important to acknowledge that distrust remains. You can't wave a magic wand and say, well, it's time to move on, everyone. You should trust us again. It doesn't work that way. The only way to make up that trust deficit is, once again, by showing up. And the reason that's important right now is that there is going to be another crisis at some point. I don't know what the next crisis is going to be, but it's going to be here. And in a crisis, the only thing you have is your credibility. That's it. At least the first moments of the crisis, when you're communicating about what's happening and what you're doing, the only asset you bring to the table is your credibility. And if leadership in Maine doesn't have that credibility because of the aftermath of COVID, the next crisis is going to be that much more difficult. The other ones I'm going to keep smaller.
Those lessons and more are what Nirav Shah wants to share now with students at Colby. Those he hopes will become the next generation to lead the country's public health.
And being a Brunswick guy. And there was a whole lot more we talked about in that interview than we could include in that piece. If you'd like to hear and see more of it, the interview is on our News Center Maine Plus channel, and you can listen to that as well as a special that was put together on the 5th anniversary of the pandemic.
Very good. Thank you, Don.